Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with this week in cannabis news from May 16th to the 22nd. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. And today we're going to start with a speculative update from Emily Wilkins, who reports on matters in Congress, as she shares that Pelosi says she wants the Competes USICA bill to be done by July 4th. And we know that it is currently in a bipartisan bicameral conference to negotiate the details, and it is this bill that we are hoping the Safe Banking Act might make it through, as there is a lot of support building for it, and obviously the longer that SAFE does not get passed, more lives are getting taken, sadly, by robberies targeting these cannabis dispensaries because they operate in cash. And so just wanted to share this because this is in line with what we saw last week, as House Member Hoyer said that he anticipates that they might be able to get the final version of the bill done by the end of June. End of June is quite close to July 4th, and so this is the second voice coming out saying that it will likely be done by the start of summer. So just wanted to share that as an update. So on to this news from Marijuana Moment, as Massachusetts adult use cannabis sales officially exceed $3 billion, the state reports. As Massachusetts adult use cannabis sales have officially surpassed $3 billion since the market launched in 2018, state officials reported on Wednesday. And with 216 cannabis retailers, I'm sure if they had a lot more retailers open, they'd see a lot more sales, but they'll get there. And 11 delivery businesses operating across the Commonwealth, the total gross sales for recreational cannabis reached $3 billion as of May 14th, 2022. Good job, Massachusetts. The Cannabis Control Commission noted that it's only been 8 months since the state reported that sales has exceeded $2 billion. And so you can see the growth here from November 2018 all the way up until now, going from 0 to $3 billion. Pretty impressive. And the sales figures illustrate the steady growth Massachusetts residents expected when they voted to legalize adult use in 2016, and the commission was appointed in 2017. And this was mentioned in a press release. And so just to go down to highlight, this year's cannabis holiday, known as 420 alone, saw 5.9 million in cannabis sales on that one day alone, which is more than 1 million more compared to April 20th of last year, when apparently they only had 194 retailers at the time. And so obviously more retailers helps drive the sales. And so just to highlight, we know, but Massachusetts isn't the only state that's seeing a cannabis economic boom. So more information down here if you just wanted to pause to read about what's going on in other states, but just happy to highlight that states that have ended cannabis prohibition are seeing the benefits, and sales are growing and they're chugging along. As Cresco Labs announces their first quarter 2022 results, and as a Cresco Lab shareholder, and it is in fact my largest position, and I'm in no way affiliated with the company, it just happens to be the horse that I'm betting the largest on. I'm very happy with the results given the circumstances that we've seen with the other MSOs going through Croptober, which leads to weaker Q4 and Q1 sales, and then weaker spending in January and February, as these trends are what we're seeing year over year. And in fact, Cresco didn't necessarily have a position in New Jersey and wasn't expecting more growth to come online, but given that fact, I'm pretty happy to see that they managed steady sales and they didn't see too much of a drop sequentially, and of course they did manage to end up buying that, that extra footprint with the Columbia Care sale, which seems to be going through, or seems to be going well as it progresses. And so just to highlight, company reports 20% year-over-year revenue growth and 45% year-over-year adjusted EBITDA growth. EBITDA means earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, and continues industry leadership in branded wholesale and retail productivity, which I'll touch on this a little bit later as well, but I'm very happy to see that. While they clear their first milestone in proposed Columbia Care transaction with expiration of 30-day HSR review period. So it seems like that deal is on track to go through. And so you can pause to read the first quarter highlights if you like, but mainly first quarter revenue of $214 million, which is down a little bit sequentially from $217 million last quarter, but still year over year up 20%. I'm happy to see that. And main thing that I wanted to highlight is that Cresco has come out of the gate saying that they will be the wholesale leader. And so I'm just happy to see that their wholesale revenue share has not dropped whatsoever, and they're maintaining that market share as the wholesale revenue leader. Adding that they brought in wholesale revenue of $95 million, maintaining the position as the #1 seller of branded cannabis products in U.S. with leading share in flower, concentrates, and vape categories. And so over time, if they were to see decreasing market share, then I'd be a bit concerned, but since they're maintaining that as the wholesale leader, I'm very happy to see that, because that's what you do want to see. And as they, don't have as big of a retail presence as some of the other MSOs, also very happy to see that retail revenue increased 44% year over year, up to $119 million, especially as they purchased Columbia Care, which is going to give them more dispensaries. Clearly, they know how to run a dispensary well. That equates to $2.5 million per average store open in the quarter, and same-store sales increased 9% year over year. And so they're keeping the customers. Customers are obviously very happy with their brands and their products. And so that's the main thing I wanted to highlight out of the first quarter highlights. But you can pause to read the rest if you'd like. And then you can pause to read some management commentary if you're interested as well. And then there's just more information here, balance sheet, liquidity, and other financial information, some of their social equity and education development program and initiatives that they're taking on. This was a film that they featured, and so capital markets and M&A activity as they plan to close this big purchase of Columbia Care, which will help them compete with the other big MSOs by the end of the year. But so just to scroll down and highlight some of the main things that I noticed and that that I'm very happy with seeing. If we compare year over year, March 31st, 2021 to March 31st, 2022, we can see that they brought in revenue of $178.4 million. With cost of goods sold of 91.4. So they spent 91.4 to bring in 178, leaving them with a gross profit of 87 million. And so if we look year over year, they brought in, so we can say that they spent about 16 million more in cost of goods sold, up to about 107 million, in order to bring in 214 million, which is about 36 million in revenue more than last year. And so obviously if you're spending 16 million more to bring in 36 million more, that's double the revenue. That's a good sign, and I'm happy to see that. And especially if we actually look compared to last quarter, they actually spent less on their cost of goods sold this quarter than they did last quarter. And again, while they didn't make as much revenue, slightly less, we weren't expecting much growth, but that does set them up for better Q2 and Q3s going forward when we do see more growth usually. And we'll have to take a look to see how they optimize and increase their revenue while also keeping their cost of goods sold down. And they managed to maintain a gross profit of 50%, down a little bit from 50.5% last quarter, but up year over year from 48.8%. So we love to see that as they are keeping, half of the revenue that they're bringing in. While their operating expenses are inching up quarter over quarter, in this last quarter they spent 76 million on selling general administrative. And if we look from last quarter, that's up just over 6 million from 70.5. If we look year over year, up to 59.54. But then of course, when we subtract total operating expenses from their gross profits, they're managing to steadily, or at least year over year, in that right direction, keeping more income from operations. As last year at this time, they managed 16.2 million income from operations, and then this quarter, up from 15.5 million last quarter, but for this quarter, income from operations of 20.2 million. And so seems like they're paying some taxes this quarter, and so in the end, they have a net loss of negative 23.6 million, which is a little bit more from last quarter where they had 11.9 million, but definitely seems like Cresco Labs can reach profitability probably by the end of this year, especially if the deal goes through without any sort of issues, and then they can manage to continue scaling their operations, cutting costs, and seeing some revenue growth in Q2, Q3 as we move forward this year. So we'll have to look out for that. But lastly, just wanted to touch on their balance sheet, as if we look at their current or their cash and cash equivalents as of right now, they're sitting on 179 million in cash, which is obviously nice to see. Better to have cash than not, while their other current assets are 220 million. And so I didn't do the math previously or before starting to record this video, but all I do know is that if we add up their cash and cash equivalents and all their current assets, they would have enough to pay off all of their total current liabilities for the next 12 months. And so that tells me that they should be good for the next 12 months. And obviously, I think they're working as hard as they can to make sure the Columbia Care deal goes through, because I think that will benefit both companies. Obviously, will help them compete in the long run. But I am also happy to add, just compared to some of the other big MSOs, as we did see Cresco write off some of their goodwill last year, I think in Q3 of last year, and they took a fairly big hit. But for that reason, we can see that they only have roughly a little under 900 million in goodwill and intangible assets compared to some of the other MSOs that are over 1.3 billion or up to 1.6 billion. And so at least as a shareholder, I do like to see that. And so even with all the M&A Cresco's been doing, and these numbers likely do not include the Columbia Care deal, and so when that does go through, it's going to add quite a few numbers to this balance sheet most likely. But I think that's a good sign that Cresco has the experience, much like the other MSOs. They make sure they do the research and acquire the right companies that are going to actually provide a return on investment. And from my understanding, if you do acquire companies and they can do that, that leads to you writing off less goodwill and intangible assets as they produce more revenue than they end up costing you in the end. And so all in all, just very happy to report. But that's mainly what I noticed and what I wanted to share as a long-term Cresco Labs shareholder. And so just wanted to share a few more notes on that, or a few other things from Todd Harrison. This is his Cresco Labs call notes. And so just if you're interested, I was not able to tune into the call. However, he made quite a few bullet points and there's quite a few pictures. And so this just gives you an idea of what they see going forward. And so, obviously I'm quite happy with what they note, but so you can pause to read if you want to go through that. So a nice long one here as well. You can pause to read. Otherwise, you can grab the link below if you'd like. And so that one's it for these notes on Cresco Labs. Well, thank you, Joe Greisler, for sharing this one, as Cresco Labs secures a $38 million tax break from their New York cannabis facility, which we love to see, because if you don't ask, you will not get, and if you do ask, you might end up getting. So this will save Cresco Labs $38 million like that. And so more than the story here if you want to grab it below, but I've been reporting on this and how they've applied for this in the past. So obviously one incentive for states in order to get companies to build in there and provide jobs and help boost their local economies is to give them tax breaks. And so happy to see this. And again, saves Cresco a nice 38 mil. Happy to report that. While Puff Daddy shares that Trulieve opening stores number 3 and 4 in South Charleston and Parkersburg, West Virginia this past week will be stores 166 and 167 nationwide. They are going beast mode. And so this is as of May 18th. So happy to share that Trulieve continues to expand as well. Well, I wanted to share this one from the Office of Medical Cannabis Use, looking at this past week from May 16th to the 20th. And we look at companies that have opened up new dispensaries in Florida. Curaleaf opened 2, one in Orlando, one in Tampa. Green Dragon has opened 2, one in Merritt Island and one in Titusville, while Jungle Boys has opened a dispensary in Ocala. Well, if we look up, we can see that in Florida, the qualified patient count has increased week over week to 723,322, which represents an increase of 3,956 patients week over week. So almost 4,000 in 1 week. So that's a pretty big jump, which we love to see. If we take a look for this past week of May 13th to the 19th, we can see all the MSOs that operate in the state, the number of dispensaries that they have, and the number of milligrams of THC sold, milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower. And so you can compare week over week to see how the company that you might have invested in is doing in this competitive state of Florida. And happy to share from Pierre Gilles. So thank you, Pierre, as he puts all that information into a spreadsheet for us so that we can easily identify who is leading the way, who's second, who's third. And so Florida flower market share, comp sheet top 8. And so this is as of May 20th, I believe. So he has updated it from the most recent week. And so again, we can see Trulieve number 1, Curaleaf number 2, Muv, which is owned by Verano, number 3, Certera Wellness, which I think is Consortium, number 4, Grow Healthy, while Liberty Health Sciences has fallen to 6. I don't know the parent company behind Grow Healthy, but and then we can see Fluent, Sunnyside as well, 7th and 8th at the bottom here. But so thank you, Pierre, for sharing this. And so if you wanted to keep track, if you do happen to own an MSO in Florida, I recommend following Pierre Gilles on Twitter because I think he posts this every single week, so you just get easy access to that. Well, happy to share that support is building for SAFE, as obviously the longer that it does not get passed, the more that solution is needed, as the Cannabis Regulators Association sent a must-read letter to congressional leaders today on the critical need for safe banking. And so they're happy to tweet this, while Marijuana Moment did pick up the same story and wrote about it, so just happy to share it from their perspective. It's a little different, but just funny nonetheless, and obviously we're just happy to highlight that pressure is building for SAFE as we move through uncharted waters and we wait for the conference process to conclude. So state cannabis regulators say banking fix will make their jobs easier, obviously, in addition to helping businesses. Helping the cannabis industry tremendously. And so just to add, the Non-Bipartisan Cannabis Regulators Association, which doesn't take a stand on legalization itself, sent a letter to congressional leaders on Wednesday outlining 3 key areas of concerns for their state's respective cannabis markets under the status quo of federal prohibition. And regardless, you don't have to, take a stand on legalization. Just to highlight that if dispensaries don't have cash, less people are going to die because they're not going to be targets for robbery. It's just so much common sense at this point. But the letter doesn't specifically endorse the Secure and Fair Enforcement Safe Banking Act, which I find funny because, well, they say it doesn't specifically endorse it, which is a major component of a debate playing out in the bicameral conference committee, where lawmakers are seeking to attach the legislation's language to a large-scale manufacturing bill as we speak. But it does say that the lack of safe banking and financial services for the cannabis industry and for those indirectly involved in cannabis marketplaces has become a dire public safety issue. And so basically, saying that basically means that they want SAFE to pass as much as possible. So while they don't directly endorse it, you got to read between the lines sometimes. And so just happy to share that, again, more support is growing for SAFE. And so just to touch on what they focus on in their letter, and you can pause to read if you're interested, but this is from them sending it to Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, and Kevin McCarthy. And the 3 points that they highlight or speak on are public safety and security. So that's obviously number 1. And they make a good argument because obviously you don't fix this problem, you're going to have more lives taken, sadly. Number 2, government regulatory agency access to banking and depository services makes it better for banks, regulators, insurers, everyone else involved who, and this web is massive that it reaches out to. And so you can pause to read. While lastly, and maybe they should have put this first to appease Chuck Schumer that they're fighting for social justice, but small and minority cannabis businesses access to financial resources. And this is obviously one of the most important reasons as well. And it would be in Chuck Schumer's best interest to pass SAFE in order to keep the promise that he kept to those that voted for him and allow small businesses and minority entrepreneurs a shot to even get access to capital and start in this industry, because if SAFE does not pass, they do not have that chance. And so just to highlight, signed by some individuals with important titles as they urge Congress to take these state realities to heart and to prioritize policy approaches that promote safe banking. So asking for safe banking without directly asking for safe banking. And so hopefully Schumer actually reads this letter, and hopefully he gets to this part so that he realizes, maybe if I keep my promises to those who voted for me, I might have a chance of winning again in November. And in time, time, as thankfully no one died in this story here, but happy to share Joe Greisler is another cannabis dispensary armed robbery in Pasadena. Shots were fired. Police pursuit. Story is ongoing as 3 armed suspects robbed cannabis dispensary near Pasadena. If you pass Safe Banking Act, you get cash out of these dispensaries. They're no longer targets from organized crime. It's just so as straightforward and common sense as that. And so I wanted to share a few stories as well. This one from Cannabis Business Times, highlighting what I mentioned in past videos, but just got a lot of information in one place if you might have missed that one and you want to catch up. As more than 20 senators urge congressional leadership to include Safe Banking Act in pending legislative package. And so just to highlight that the support is growing, and so you can pause to read a little bit of what they included down here as well, more information, and then everyone who signed on to the letter as well showing their support. And so you can pause to read a little bit more about this, but so again, just happy to highlight that support is building to get Safe passed finally in this America Competes bill, while this one also touches off of Rep. Blumenauer and some of his quotes that he mentioned that I put in my last video. Safe banking has perfect opportunity to pass in Congress soon, says legalization leader. And while he says that, we also know that it has an opportunity of being taken out by Chuck Schumer because he's done that in the past with Safe and the NDAA, and it could happen again. So plan accordingly for your own situation. But just happy to share this. And so this article is mostly a one-on-one with Rep. Blumenauer, and it builds off of a quote that he made earlier this week when he tweeted saying that he's very optimistic as a member of the conference process that Safe has a chance of making it through to the final version of this bill. And so you can pause to read for a little bit more perspective and Leafly's take on how we got to where we are today. And so this time around, why is Safe Competes Act different? You can pause to read, but their main argument is the robberies, which is true. You pass Safe Banking, you get the cash out of there, you do save lives, and that's why Safe is good policy, should have been passed a long time ago. And then lastly, new voices entering the conversation, so you can pause to read if you like. On to state news, as apparently the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission will be holding their next meeting on May 24th at 1 p.m., which is Tuesday. And so while we don't necessarily know what they will bring, could that be an approval for Air Wellness, who didn't get to launch for adult use last time, or maybe some more stores for these other MSOs? We'll have to wait and see, but I will update you on Wednesday as to what does happen, and we can take a look at their agenda, and we can see that they might consider some new medicinal cannabis applications and personal use cannabis applications. So fingers crossed, let's hope for the best for these MSOs in New Jersey. Well, we got some other news out of Rhode Island as Todd Harrison shares, so thank you, Todd, as recreational cannabis legislation moves forward in Rhode Island, for this week at least. As the Senate Judiciary and House Finance Committees both advanced legislation to their respective chambers, and apparently these will be taken up next week. And so hopefully I'll be able to update you then as well, maybe on Wednesday, but hopefully by Sunday. While apparently news out of Kansas, so thank you, Tom, as Kansas's House Minority Leader is making a final push for lawmakers to reach a deal on a bill to legalize medical cannabis ahead of Monday's end of session deadline. While this is just talk as of right now, hopefully I will have an update for you in the moment, because it would be great if we see another state like Kansas that has yet to reform their laws take the next incremental step, introduce medical cannabis, and provide their citizens with a safe, non-addictive alternative to opioids. Well, happy to update from RadioIowa.com that apparently as of now, or as of May 17th, there are 12,300 Iowans that have registered to legally buy medical cannabis. As new data shows slow but steady growth in the number of Iowans planning to buy products from Iowa's medical cannabis dispensaries. And so hopefully the quicker they can normalize this, the faster this will grow in the state. But about 0.5% of Iowans who are 21 years of age or older had a state registration card and could buy medical cannabis products at the 5 state licensed dispensaries in April. And so a doctor, physician's assistant, or an advanced registered nurse practitioner has to recommend medical cannabis as treatment for an illness, making it no doubt one of the most restrictive medical cannabis programs in the country. But that also means it's literally only up from here as they continue to recruit from just the 0.5% that have access to medical cannabis. According to the Iowa Department of Public Health, nearly 9,700 patients had state-issued cards in April, and that's a 36% increase since May of last year. And about 2,600 Iowa caregivers have registered to buy cannabis products for someone who is too young or too ill to buy it for themselves, and that's a 26% increase in caregiver registrations from a year ago. And so slow but steady is leading the way in Iowa. Well, happy to report that there's a petition circulating in North Dakota to place cannabis legalization on the ballot as of May 17th, 2022. This comes from the Center Square. And so happy to report that North Dakota is likely to enact a cannabis legalization law by the end of the year. Jared Moffitt, campaigns manager at the Cannabis Policy Project, told the Center Square last year the state legislature came close to passing a legalization bill too. North Dakota's House of Representatives approved HB 1420, but it was ultimately defeated in the Senate. So Moffitt said the current ballot measure represents a responsible and conservative approach to legalization that aligns with North Dakota's values of personal responsibility and individual freedoms. And so just to add, in order to be placed on the ballot in November, the petition needs to generate about 15,000 signatures by July July 11th. And so gives them about 2 months to do that, and I have no doubt that they can get that done, and I'm sure they're underway. So good luck, North Dakota, and hopefully you can get that on the ballot so you can, reform your laws one step at a time. And Todd Harrison, thank you for sharing this. As not all states are created equal. Sadly, we got some unfortunate news that Minnesota Republican senators blocked a cannabis legalization vote in Minnesota. And so while we know that Minnesota does have a medical program that has just expanded to allowing medical flower, they were potentially going to legalize this year if they could get it done. Sadly, it doesn't look like that, as a House companion version passed the full chamber last year, but the motion was defeated in a 31-33 vote this year. And so hopefully we can see an effort to get this put on the ballot maybe from now until November. Otherwise, we might have to look until 2023 and 2024 to see Minnesota legalizing for adult use. And then onto this one from Normal. Just happy to share this study, as it's more data proving the prohibitionists wrong, that young adults' consumption of alcohol, cigarettes, and other substances fell following cannabis legalization. So not what most people would expect, but numbers don't lie, as retail cannabis sales are associated with decreases in the use of alcohol, cigarettes, and pain medications by young adults, according to data published by the Journal of Adolescent Health. Researchers with the University of Washington assessed trends in alcohol, nicotine, and non-prescribed pain reliever use among a cohort of over 12,500 young adults aged 18 to 25 in Washington state following adult use legalization. And they reported, contrary to concerns about spillover effects, implementation of legalized non-medical cannabis coincided with decrease in alcohol and cigarette use and pain reliever misuse. Researchers did find that the prevalence of past month e-cigarette use increased post-legalization. And so despite this last tidbit here, the authors concluded our findings add to evidence that legalization of non-medical cannabis has not led to dramatic increases in the use of alcohol, cigarettes, and non-prescribed opioids. The findings indicate that the most critical public health concerns surrounding cannabis legalization and the evolution of legalized cannabis markets may be specific to cannabis use and related consequences. And if you're really worried about public health concerns, you'd want to focus on addressing alcohol, cigarettes, and non-prescribed opioids, not cannabis. And so nonetheless, just happy to report that as time goes on, more data highlights that ending cannabis prohibition has more pros than cons. And so last few ones to share, this one from Jungle Java. Just a reminder that Canadian markets will be closed on Monday for Victoria Day. This also includes the CSE, and so just anticipate that for Monday, as we do have a long weekend. So hope you all have a great long weekend if you're Canadian. Otherwise, if you're in the US, just have a great weekend. But Toronto Stock Exchange, TSX Venture, TSX Alpha Exchange, and Montreal Exchange all closed for Victoria Day. And so we've got this one from Bulldog sharing some notable MSOS institutional ownership position changes from Q1 2022, looking at the 13F filings. And so obviously one of the main reasons the MSOs have such a difficult time is they can't uplist onto major exchanges yet because they deal with the cannabis plant, which forces them onto the OTC or the CSE. And so if they could uplist on major exchanges like the NASDAQ or the NYSE or the TSX, it would be much easier for institutions to invest in them. But since they don't, and most institutions don't invest on the over-the-counter, they just avoid them altogether. And so happy to share, though, that some institutions are taking advantage of these cheap prices. Eminence Capital, who I believe the fund manager is Ricky Sandler, increased their position by 2.5%, and they are the top holder of MSOS ETF, while Morgan Stanley increased their position by 43% and Rockefeller Capital by 52%, which just means that there's so much more room for institutional ownership. If that flip switches, if SAFE passes, and we get that safe harbor language, that gives institutions the confidence to start investing in these companies, even if they're still on the OTC and the CSE. And so lastly, though, just to highlight that JW Asset Management, this is Jason Wild, who is the executive chairman of TerraSend, closed out his position of MSOS 100%, but we know that in March and April, he was buying shares of TerraSend. And so he likely closed out that position so he could use that cash more effectively in an individual company, which will likely get him more capital gains over time than investing in the basket of MSOS, which, gets a little bit of every single company. So just wanted to share that. And so if he does dive into this more this weekend and, adds a little bit more to this, then I will try and update that on Wednesday or for my next week's video. Well, lastly, just wanted to share this great visual of where we sit today. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this. As Whitney Tilson posted his monthly write-up last night, highlighting the mouth-watering valuations in U.S. cannabis. I think he says here Curaleaf or Cresco Labs in particular. But looking at U.S. cannabis, and obviously he has a position in it as one of the advisors of MSOS, but looking at the North American Cannabis Index and price-to-sales multiples, so while it seems unbelievable, it is also true that North American cannabis companies combined, US MSOs and Canadian LPs, are trading for a lower price to sales multiples today than they were in March 2020 when the pandemic first hit and we saw that market crash. So take from that what you will, but my power just went out and there's a wild storm going on, so I'm going to end this video here. But hope you got some value out of that, and thank you so much for tuning in, as that is it for this week's episode. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.